Hey, what's going on, Champagne Sharks? How's everyone doing? Yeah, so we're about to get started. We're just waiting for Katie to get here, but yeah, let me just start bringing people on. But how's everyone doing out there? Yeah, so we have Nathan J. Robinson. How's it going?
Good evening. Hello. Pretty well, thanks.
Oh, good. And we have P.E. Moskowitz.
How you doing?
Yeah, and there's something I want to talk about for a while, and it's taken a while to set this up. But I want to talk about like everybody's favorite person in politics and think tanks, Neera Tanden. Nathan had a great article about Neera Tanden a while ago, and it's hard to describe. How would you describe Neera Tanden? Actually, you know what? First off, let's explain who both of you are. Nathan, if you don't mind getting started, since I addressed you first,
Sure.
who you are and where we can find you.
Oh, yeah. I am the editor-in-chief of Current Affairs Magazine, which is at currentaffairs.org, and also in print. Until quite recently, I was a political columnist for The Guardian before being terminated, which you can read about on currentaffairs.org. I've also got a couple of books, including Why You Should Be a Socialist, and upcoming book is called Responding to the Right, Quick Replies to Conservative Arguments.
Oh, wait. So that last one is upcoming. It's not out yet?
Yeah, it's out in November, but I think they've just put it up for pre-order. So,
okay, cool. And PE, if you don't mind doing the same.
Yeah, I'm P.E. Moskowitz. I'm most relevant to today, the author of The Case Against Free Speech, the First Amendment, Fascism, and the Future of Dissent, and just a journalist and author and writer about town.
Yeah, and Neera, what I want to talk about in general was this idea of cancel culture and different people's arguments against it, and why some things count as cancel culture and why some things don't. Like, for example, I don't think, I could be wrong. I don't check minute to minute, but I don't think Barry Weiss or Thomas Chatterton Williams or any of them are up in arms about the union guy who gets, the person who gets kicked out of the job for joining a union. That's not really a cancellation. Neera Tanden, I don't think, has even really gotten much cancel culture hand wringing. And Nathan, I think you're an example of someone who I don't think Thomas Chatterton Williams has called you up, has he? To talk about
he
you being.
he has not. There was an open letter defending me against my firing, and the authors of the open letter did try and get Thomas Chatterton Williams and Barry Weiss to sign, but received no response. Strangely enough, I noticed that. In the weeks after I was fired for a tweet critical of U.S. military aid to Israel, the New York Times ran several articles about cancel culture, including a Bret Stephens column about that was complaining that Bon Appetit had changed a headline about Hamantaschen, and he was very upset. He thought it was political correctness gone mad, that this headline had been slightly tweaked. And there was also a full discussion of Slate firing a guy for a controversy over saying the N-word and defending its use. But strangely enough, the free speech warriors did not pour out in my defense. I was completely shocked because I thought they would rally to my side.
Now, what's your thought on that? Why do you think that is?
Well, because I think generally that a lot of the people who say they believe in free speech generally are just complaining about the fact that there is criticism of conservative beliefs. The very phrase cancel culture is extremely poorly defined, right? What it means to cancel somebody. Oftentimes it sort of lumps in being criticized by a lot of people on Twitter, which is free speech, with losing a job. And most of the time the people who lose jobs end up kind of fine when they do. And I think a lot of these people are just upset that there is pushback against conservative beliefs, and that some people are they don't like to be called racist. and that gets defined as a free speech question when it isn't really a free speech question. And the actual free speech questions are things like what Mark Lamont Hill has written in the book on the Palestine exception to free speech. And the crackdown on BDS, for instance, and left-wing professors. There was a Black Lives Matter supporting professor who got fired from a job. These sorts of things don't really become controversial.
Yeah, and PE, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say that this has a very specific history. It doesn't just come about randomly. Like for the last 30, 40 years, the very far right. Funded by the usual suspects of billionaires, the Koch brothers, the DeVos family, etc., has essentially funded this strategy of using free speech and cancel culture to push through really far-right ideas to the mainstream. So back in the 70s, they got together, this guy, Richard Fink, if I'm remembering his name correctly, a policy advisor to the Koch, got together, basically outline the strategy of, if we say we want low taxes on corporations and no environmental regulation and to, dismantle public education in this country, Americans won't really go for that. But if we say that our ideas are a free speech issue, then people will have no choice but to hear us out. And so what they've done is fund hundreds of universities and professorships and books and all of these things that at their core, these things they're funding are really about, extreme far-right ideas, but they're all phrased in this way of, this is about being canceled or my free speech being trampled upon. So that way, even, well-meaning liberals have no choice but to fight for them. So when you look at like the early 90s and the whole anti-PC culture wave with Dinesh D'Souza and all those lovely people, that was all funded directly by those billionaires. And we're still living with the kind of consequence of that today, and the strategy is ongoing. So yeah, again, it's the same bullshit. It's the same far right bullshit over and over again. It's just the way to get people to agree with you is to frame it as cancel culture, because then you're not actually paying attention to what they're saying. You're paying attention to some abstract moral value that you can supposedly all agree on.
I can't hear Trevor. Can you guys hear him?
No, I think you muted.
You're a good ally. Thank you
Yeah,
for
there we
letting me
go.
speak.
Yeah, there we
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
I'm silencing myself.
Silence yourself to uplift my voice. Yeah.
Exactly. But Katie, I wanted you to get a chance to introduce yourself before we get fully underway.
Sure. Hey, hi everyone. Nice to meet you, P. Nice to see you again, Nathan. Although I still haven't met you IRL, but over many a Zoom.
No, you and I seem to run into each other constantly on podcasts, but
yeah, that's true. I'm the. So you want me to introduce myself? Okay, I'm the host of two shows. One is the Katie Halper Show, and the other one is Useful Idiots. And we are moving from Rolling Stone, by the way. So we're going to be,
really?
Yeah, you can find us on Substack. Cue the think pieces about that site. You can find us on Substack starting this week. And I can't announce who our guest is, but it's real. He's really good. I'll just say he's involved in certain papers. That's all I'll say.
Okay, interesting.
And what else? Yeah, I helped. I tried to uncancel. I tried to rebrand Nathan as a FOJ, friend of the Jews, after he got unfairly fired for making a joke about Israel. So we did. So Matt Taibbi and I had Thomas and Chatterton Williams on our show. Before we invited him before that letter happened. It was actually about something he had written about lockdown, and it was interesting because I asked him about. I brought up the Bernie bro trope, and said something about. I said the Bernie bro trope about how Bernie's sexist, racist, whatever, as Glenn Greenwald has written about. Speaking of which, did you think of asking him to sign the letter? And he goes, Bernie? I was like, oh, no, Glenn, which would have been hilarious to ask Bernie. But, and he was like, no. And I was like, oh, why not? And it was, consensus, lots of people want to be on but it was obviously he was not allowed. He was not within the space, permissible free speech space. Like regardless, and this was mostly, regardless of what you think of Glenn Greenwald's politics or views, like there was just no reason, if your point is elevating voices, regardless of where they are, there was just no justification for not having him on, especially because he talks about that, more than many other people. And again, whether according to Barry Weiss, it doesn't matter what your opinions are of this person, right?
I mean, Thomas Chatterton Williams bragged that he canceled someone out of his home just for saying something bad about Barry Weiss.
Barry Weiss, yeah. I wonder if they didn't sufficiently praise her for trying to get Palestinian professors at Columbia fired.
Well, that's kind of the irony about this. Like, those people who made the letter preemptively canceled Glenn Greenwald. They also... Barry Weiss has tried to get plenty of people fired.
And there's Gary Nelson also, who went after Stephen Salaita, who's a Palestinian professor, and he helped get him fired, and has said terrible things about him, all because of his tweets about Gaza, which were totally inoffensive. And if you want to look at the limits of cancel culture and free speech, just look at the discussion of Israel. And actually, one of the reasons that I often disagree with my fellow leftists on this a little bit is because I do think that, limiting, kind of giving up on free speech and writing that off as like a liberal bourgeois ideal, I think we have to be careful with that, because the more we kind of accept and this is so charged and hard to talk about. I'll just say that the biggest victims of censorship or limits on free speech, and I know I agree with you, P, that there is really no free speech, substantively speaking. But the biggest, the people most punished by, censorship or by content moderation are almost always Palestinian or Arab American or just Israel critics, and they will get their accounts deactivated with no, you have to go to like Electronic Intifada to find an article about it.
Right.
Shout out to Ali Abunima. But so yeah, that was a kind of all over the place intro to me, and wanted to mostly, again, just say that Nathan, have you been hired by The Guardian yet?
Have I been
rehired by them?
Shockingly, I've not been offered my job back despite
right.
the public outcry.
We got to have this is a terrible thing, and it's a terrible look for Jews, and we don't like this. The progressive Jews.
I also haven't been offered a job by any of the other publications that supposedly value ideological diversity, which you think.
Oh, right. Yeah, you should be at the New York Times now.
Yeah, I mean, they published Bret Stephens. You'd think
Yeah.
they'd also want to publish perhaps someone who is not a right-winger.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
Yeah.
I think Katie makes a great point too, just about like free speech is a serious issue. It's not that, we should just write off free speech. It's that what we have in our current system, isn't really free speech. We have free speech for some and not for many. And, I know this sounds like an obvious point, but like, what is free speech to someone who is in prison for their whole lives, or like even someone who is working 60 hours a week to make ends meet, who like can't, afford to take time off to go to a city council meeting or whatever. Like those to me are free speech violations as much as someone being kicked off Twitter or something like that. So, or much more than someone being kicked off Twitter. So it's not that I think like free speech is bad, but
Right.
I think we think of it in this really myopic way that like only applies to, like media people who want to make money off being canceled, essentially, which is why I've started calling it like, instead of cancel culture, like the cancel economy, because I think it's good for these people to be canceled. They say incendiary shit, which they should be allowed to say. People get angry at them. That gets them more people, to be on their side. They say they're canceled. That gets more people to be on their side, and then they get more subscribers. So,
Right.
yeah, it's an economy.
Yeah. I had Chomsky on my show, and I asked him about this, and I was like, so there's this whole discussion about whether or not certain people should be given, platforms, and he's like, oh, you're talking about cancel culture. I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, yeah, cancel culture isn't new. The only thing that's new about it, he said, is that like the left used to oppose it, and now they're somewhat on board, which I think is an interesting, I think that's a controversial thing to say, but I do think that sometimes it's hard to walk the line of like, of being a leftist, getting that free speech is defined by material conditions, and also, thinking that online debate can be fruitful, or that certain ideas shouldn't be labeled as like toxic or problematic, even though I'm not saying that's not like a violation of anyone's free speech or human rights. I think that's kind of a different thing, though. And I think what a big problem with the discussion is that we use the word cancel as this kind of, it's very amorphous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you on that. Yeah, I think there is a kind of problem on the left, which I don't even know what that means anymore. But I think there's like two separate issues. One, there's like all these people who are like monetizing the quote unquote cancel culture. And then, or I guess there are three separate issues. And then there's like the actual violation of free speech that so many people experience like on a governmental level. But then there is this problem, I think, in the discourse that like I was resistant to acknowledge at first because I didn't want to kind of play into the far right being like the left has a cancel culture problem or whatever. But it's true. I think that especially online, people are very scared to just like allow ideas to exist and think that they have to have like kind of ultimate control over them. And I think it's just counterproductive a lot of the time.
Yeah, and I think that there's like what scares me about that, and again, it's like, yes, what's much scarier is people rotting in prison for like stealing a piece of bread or something. So again, it's hard to, and I almost struggle with this. Like, can we talk about this? I'm not blaming any of you out here. I'm saying like I struggle with this. I'm like, okay, how frequently do I have to remind people that the most censored people are Palestinian for me to be able to make this point about other issues? And it is like there is, I think, kind of a fear of like making this into a bigger deal than it is, or keeping it in perspective. But I do think that one part of it that's kind of interesting and does have larger ramifications about power and material conditions and people's lives is that I think that there is this kind of, speaking of amorphous, there's kind of a visceral, like toxic feeling, like where people don't have to define why an argument or a person is toxic. They just are, because they've had this person on their show or they've been with this person on their show. And why I think that's scary is because I've seen it so frequently weaponized against people who I think are making really important, like anti-war arguments, and they just become persona non grata. But if you ask them why, they won't be able to tell you why.
But I think defending, I'm sorry, I'm gonna say one thing I think is that I think not saying why somebody's toxic kind of works the other way too. Like that vagueness, I think, is weaponized in a way such that when you make everything a cancel culture debate, you don't have to say why, what someone said. So kind of like, hey, so and so are being canceled. Isn't this horrible? We have to stop cancel culture. Like someone like Barry Weiss or Thomas Chatterton Williams will say that, and then the whole day you'll be stuck there arguing about whether cancellation is good or not. But what they don't tell you that this person said that black people have physically smaller brains and all have low IQs, because they know if they actually say that, a lot of the people who are just having a knee-jerk, anti-cancel culture thing would be like, oh, wait a minute, I don't want to be associated with that. And they don't want to have to explicitly defend that, because that's really what it always comes down to. Anytime someone makes something about cancel culture, what they're really saying without saying it is, I don't think personally this is bad enough for someone to lose their job over. And once you make it that explicit, now you have to litigate the value. And I think that was a big part of PE's book, is that there aren't many, if any, true free speech absolutists. There's very few people out there who are really truly like, hey, you can say anything, I'm cool with it. Talk about kiddie porn, pedophilia, genocide. I want it printed. Most people have their limits in practice where they want somebody, and you kind of saw it with a lot of these free speech cancel culture people when Colin Kaepernick was getting in trouble for bending a knee. I saw a lot of the same names in my mentions, like saying why he shouldn't work. So a lot of these people, they really don't believe in free speech absolutism or cancel culture as a principle. They just have things that they just don't want to openly admit. I don't think that's that bad. So I'm going to frame it as cancel culture.
I think that's absolutely right, and it's very, very important because a few examples of this are Kevin Williamson got fired from The Atlantic and for saying that women who have abortions ought to be hanged, and the pieces that came out defending him did not mention what he actually said. Right? Because the idea was, The Atlantic can't handle conservative opinions. Well, there was a particular conservative opinion that he'd expressed. The same is true when Charles Murray's speeches are resisted on college campuses. Now, there wouldn't be a problem if, say, the physics department didn't want to invite a flat Earth theorist. Charles Murray is the social science equivalent of a flat Earth theorist, but then it's framed in that case as a free speech issue. Andrew Sullivan leaving New York Magazine, right? Andrew Sullivan told the New York Times essentially that he believes that black people are genetically less smart, right? He's a white supremacist. and a publication is perfectly within its rights to say, I don't want to publish someone who's a racist, and we would understand that in some other cases. If someone was like an open anti-Semite, we would understand that like a publication was within its rights not to publish them. But in cases where it's views that are actually, where people are actually saying, no, this is a mainstream enough opinion to where I want to hear it. So, for example, the stuff that Ben Shapiro says about Palestinian Arabs, if it was said by someone about Jews, it would be totally and correctly out of the mainstream. You wouldn't be able to publish at Politico. But when the Politico staff resist Ben Shapiro being given a guest editing position, then it's a free speech issue. And basically, implicitly, you're saying, well, his racism is less bad, or that belongs somewhere in the legitimate discourse.
Right.
And Ben Shapiro's another one who I've seen call for people to get fired or complain about their views if it's like anti-Israel and stuff like that. So it's like each one of these people, if you look in their history, you're gonna see Barry Weiss complaining about professors or even new people, who she thinks shouldn't get a platform. They're all fine for it, deplatforming, and I feel like people fall for it when they make it about when they accept their framing and make it about free speech. And I think one reason why the left falls for it is because I think leftists in general don't really mind litigating their values. So if someone, tries to cancel them for their values, they're happy to say, no, but I think the state of Israel does do bad things to Palestine, or I think, I think there should be this or that or whatever. Whereas I feel like the right very much knows that its views sound noxious,
Right.
Yeah.
I also think. Oh,
go ahead.
sorry.
No, go ahead. I was going to say good thing.
By the way, I just want to give a shout out to Andrew Sullivan. With all those views, he still managed to realize that Jennifer Rubin, who is of course an MSNBC staple, neocon, part of the neocon to MSNBC pipeline, he managed to call her out as like Islamophobic. So I just want to recognize how much of an Islamophobe you have to be for Andrew Sullivan to do that. I think though that I think part of what the challenge is, though, is like, okay, we know that Barry Weiss is a hypocrite, right? Like everyone here in this space knows that. So I think part of where it's interesting to go is like, okay, and what? And now what? Like, what's the next part of this discussion or this debate? What do we look at? And I think that I think you're totally right, Trevor, that the vagueness of the cancel culture label and nomenclature does lend itself to exonerating certain people or covering certain people because you don't have to get into what they said. But one thing that always kind of frustrates me with cancel culture, and in a similar way with the fake news discourse, is that like the cancellation, and again, what do we call it? But I almost feel like there's a different thing that I'm talking about, which is like a toxification, like labeling something as kind of as like can't go there, can't talk about that. I think that like when people do that, what they wind up doing in some ways is they're sanctioning less controversial but extremely bad like ideology or positions or behavior, in a similar way to how I feel like that happens with when you label certain things fake news. You're unintentionally or maybe intentionally, depending, but the result is that you're kind of you're sanctifying this more mainstream but like very dangerous like reporting. Like I always think about how people talking about, oh, you have to check this on Twitter, do you really want to retweet this because it comes from Russia? And it's like, well, what about the New York Times, like not even reporting on like reporting out Bountygate and not even retracting that, or this or that myth, or WMDs during Iraq, which we still haven't grappled with, and happy 30th anniversary to Iraq, by the way. But that's another thing that I feel like we have to, I don't know, sometimes we don't want to grapple with that. So I agree with everyone. I'm just having a very like intra-left conversation with all of you.
I mean, I think it's bigger than the left even. I do think there is something going on that I'm not sure what the origins are. I think a lot of it is people figuring out how to have conversations on the internet specifically, like in this vast technology that makes everyone feel very like overwhelmed all the time. I mean, I had this happen to me where I was like temporarily canceled online because like I write a lot about mental health, and I like basically made like a throwaway tweet being like, as someone who's been diagnosed with ADHD, I feel stupid that I even have to, say that before I say this, but like I was just basically like ADHD is like partially a symptom of capitalism, like that we have to be concentrating all the time and be productive workers, which I didn't even think was a controversial opinion. But people were calling me like ableist and eugenicist and all these like really
Isn't
big.
it the opposite of eugenicists? Like, that's the opposite. You're making a very non-determinist argument.
Right,
Like,
exactly.
I mean, I have ADHD, and I'm like, I wish it were just that, but you know. But
Right.
that's I'm not offended by that.
Right. No, I mean, I don't.
And that's
Yeah,
me.
and my claim was never that it was not more than that. It was just that it was like whatever. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's besides the point. The point
Sorry, I forgot. What were you talking about?
But I mean, like I had like thousands of people calling me ableist and eugenicist, and like when I would try to engage with, you know, the less crazy ones, like they would just be like, no, this is ableist, and shut down the dialogue in that way. And I think, so I think your point is something that's like, that's not just left, but is this general way of kind of like feeling right all the time, like feeling morally correct. And instead of having like a debate about any kind of substantive issues, people have learned to use labels to kind of one up each other.
Yeah.
Totally. And
yeah, I think
to the point where you get these really weird scenarios. I just gave a talk at University of New Hampshire where a professor was like dismissed because he was like pretending to be a black woman in STEM. And like he was like a white dude. And like we were trying to like figure out the motivations for doing something like that. And I think it's because online it's like he feels like he is only allowed to say certain things if he comes from that perspective. Right. And he's only allowed to be morally right if he is a black woman, right? Which is stupid. I mean, he was saying really stupid stuff, but it's interesting that people feel like they need these labels in order to feel like they are allowed to speak over people or have the authority, the moral authority.
Yeah, I think at the academy they call that standpoint epistemology, where you know, if I have the right identities, then I have higher ranking to have the mic and speak than you. And I think what Katie's describing is, at the end of the day, it ends up being the same thing. It's the left wing or the progressive or radical or identity theory version of, I don't want to have to litigate these values, so I'm going to create this other more general vague offense, and then, you know, have that be what I get you so-called canceled on. And when Katie was saying what should we do about this, like what I try to personally do is I just try to get the person to the point where they admit that they would not be okay with something, or get them to point out like their hypocrisies. Because one example was what happened with that letter of the Harper's letter. I'll give you an example of a conversation I had. A bunch of people were going to my mentions because I was saying that they were saying that I was saying that cancel culture isn't real. I'm saying the problem isn't whether or not cancel culture is real. The problem is whether people complaining about cancel culture are really complaining about cancel culture or something else. And that's what I was saying. I was saying maybe there is a cancel culture and it's real. Maybe there's not. But regardless, all the people who are calling themselves champions against it are not sincerely fighting for the elimination of cancel culture, because all of them have a cancellation in their past that they're, you know. So I was like,
or present,
present. So, you know, so or future, it's gonna come up soon. So, you know, so I'm like, that's the problem. Whether it's real or not, the people who are presenting themselves as the champions of going against it are the debate is not real, is what I was saying. It's a smokescreen debate, and a bunch of people going to my mentions, they're complaining about Matt Iglesias and someone on Vox called, is it Emily Vander?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
She used to be Todd, but she's trans, and I think her name now is Emily. I didn't know that she was trans. It was now a new name until this conversation, because I remember her from, you know, back in the days when she used to write about Mad Men under the name Todd. But apparently she complained that Matt Iglesias signing on with some of the most heinous transphobes was a problem and everything, and she didn't like it, and it made her feel kind of unsafe to be working with someone who, I mean, under, and they were like, oh yeah, so look, now she's trying to get him canceled. I'm like, well, he's one of the founders. I don't think he's gonna really get canceled, you know. And she didn't ask for him to be fired, but they kept complaining and harping on her like crazy. So I'm like, well, doesn't the free speech or cancellation thing apply to her? Like, why
Right.
can't she complain about this? And they kept giving me all the reasons why. They're like, yeah, do you think she really felt unsafe? Do you really feel, you know, that like what's gonna happen at her job? Is someone at Vox gonna do this? I'm like, okay, so everything that you're giving me for why Meta Glacius should be not criticized because of cancel culture and free speech, but when it's time to say why she should be silenced, you give me all the merits. So I'm like, at the end of the day, you think what Meta Glacius did was not so bad, and what she did was really bad. So
Right.
why are we talking about cancel culture at all? Let's just talk about the values. You know, just say why is Meta Glacius and what he did not a bad thing against trans people, and why is what she did some kind of thing that is a panic or whatever. And as soon as I said that, he goes, yeah, but cancel culture. It just was like a brick wall.
And a really important point is that when people, leftists or people who are branded as social justice warriors, when the right comes after them for things they've said, they get death threats. They get
Right.
really, really nasty stuff. You know, the attitude towards Emily for people, once people on the right find their latest like social justice person who's they think has said like a slightly unreasonable thing, they come after them in ways that are often far more vicious than anything they accuse the left of doing. And in fact, when you investigate a lot of the big incidents of supposedly leftists canceling people, oftentimes it turns out they're leaving out really crucial facts that make the people on the left or the social justice people look far better, right? They really exaggerate the facts. There's just John McWhorter is a conservative who's just come out with a book about cancel culture, and I looked at the first example in his book and I thought, if I Google this for 5 minutes, I know there's going to be more to this story. It was about someone who was supposedly fired for saying all lives matter. Well, it turns out that just her supervisor hated her and used it as an excuse, right? It wasn't that there was a woke mob trying to get this woman fired. It was that there was a supervisor who, in bad faith, was saying,
Right.
you said all lives matter, you're gone, right? And he left all that stuff out. This woman said this was not cancel culture, but that doesn't go into it. And when you actually investigate the facts, it turns out that everything is often very backwards. There were no social justice people calling for someone to get fired. Like Emily didn't call for Matt to get fired, specifically said, I'm not saying he should be fired, I'm just criticizing him. And
Right.
then it turns out that the ones that are really, really nasty and hostile are the people on the right reacting to the supposed cancelers.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and I think that's been true in my reporting too. Like, for my book, I went to a bunch of different colleges that, you know, had these incidents happen at them, and like at Evergreen, where in Washington State.
Yeah, Washington State, yeah.
Yeah. Where they had this like a day of action thing where like it used to be that all the students of color would leave the campus just to like talk to each other and like talk about, you know, how it was hard to be, you know, Black or a student of color at like this very, very large majority white campus. And then like one year they proposed like, what happens if like the white students leave voluntarily? You don't have to, but just like to have this talk, like what happens if we reverse it? And that got, you know, turned into this whole thing. But at the professor at the center of it ended up getting like death threats, had to leave the school, had like hundreds of news articles written about her on these like far right websites, had to like change her phone number and all this shit because she was so scared that like she was going to get actual violence committed against her for doing something that was just like supporting this like random student event that wasn't even a big deal. But I think what's really going on here is like an actual battle for power, and it's not really about like, it doesn't matter what the rationale is. Like once you get beyond the cancel culture thing, no one's going to listen to you when you point out that they're all being hypocrites, because what they actually care about is that people are challenging them, and often for the first time. So when you look at someone like Charles Murray, you look at all these campus speakers, and all of a sudden students are being like actually, we think you're an idiot. That's what they're really mad about, is that people are, for the first time in their careers, being like, we disagree with you. and I think that makes them feel threatened, so they have to come up with a moralistic case for why that's wrong, as opposed to just taking the L and realizing that like the things they say have consequences, right? And that's how I viewed it. Like during my whole like Twitter cancellation thing, like I wasn't actually canceled, right? I have the same amount of followers. I make the same amount of money as I did before and after. The only lesson is that like I pissed off a bunch of like teens in like niche mental health communities online, but that's not a cancellation. The only way to turn it into a cancellation would be to get on my moral high horse and say, here's why I'm a victim of this situation, as opposed to just being like, some people disagree with me, and there's no real moral takeaway from saying some people disagree with me.
By the way, is that the person who commented about our resemblance? Yeah.
Yeah. This is the person that says we are cross-racial twins. So I couldn't remember who it was. So yeah. I'm sure he's very happy. Yes.
Thanks,
So
yeah.
yeah. So I want to add this example. I remember I saw this the other day.
Sorry, that was really good, PE. I just got distracted at
the
end because I saw the comment. I wasn't listening, but yeah.
Yeah, likewise.
Well, obviously, we're siblings, so we're similar.
Thomas Chatterton Williams did this in October. I thought it was funny. He says, "This man has well over 1 million followers at Twitter. Does this violate any of your rules at all?" So somebody kind of made a joke. I'm a free speech absolutist. LOL, this guy. And then what he said that was pretty interesting. He quote tweeted it. He got upset and he was like, got to quote tweet this one because I don't want to answer every troll that makes this lame argument. I am not a free speech absolutist and am not in favor of any speech that incites violence. First off, incites violence. I can't remember what the original tweet was because the person deleted it, but that can be something that can be interpreted very liberally. So even then, you still have to end up litigating the issue. Like short of, some people might say, hey, these people need to be shot, but a lot of times inciting violence can be a much more vague thing. But I feel like this is worse than being a free speech absolutist, to admit that you have limits. So why even play this game? But it's funny how even he kind of falls for this kind of argument where he says a quiet part out loud, like, oh yeah, I'm actually not a free speech absolutist. I have my limits and I'm willing to cancel people. And it's like, okay, so what is this about? Define your values, but they just don't want to get pinned down on anything. And here's one last example before we move on to Neera Tanden. Is there was a woman who, I have to refresh myself on this real quick, but so philosopher Nathan June had to deal with all these threats and all this stuff and official condemnation from his university president, and it was because I think he said something anti-cop. I think he said, I want the entire world to burn until the last cop is strangled with the intestines of the last capitalist. He
something mild-mannered and
yeah, exactly. So he was getting canceled, and someone said, and of course we get critics from Thomas Chatterton Williams and all the other Harper letter hysterics about cancel culture, who are so terribly concerned about the dangers posed by the putatively censorious left. And then he goes, believe it or not, I don't see every single instance that happens. That's why we publish a letter defending principles instead of enumerating cases. But I absolutely defend this professor's right to make even this highly offensive comment without facing mob justice. But even within that defense, he still kind of gives the game away because, okay, if you don't see every single instance that this happens, what determines the ones you do see? Why is it that you didn't get 1 million emails and tweets? Why didn't Barry Weiss send you something? Why didn't so-and-so send you something? The fact that you were able to not see this still gives the game the way. I mean, still gives the game away. Like somebody on that list that you're friends with, should have been on your timeline tweeting about this or sending it to you. One of your fans, a million, because I see his mentions, and he has fans that are like, hey, look at this, to get him to speak to it. So it's like, even then, this defense still kind of is,
right.
I find damning.
Yeah.
Sorry. I found the tweet, by the way, in case the June tweet, which is I want the entire. So, okay, in a comment, Dr. Nathan June told the Times Record News was a paraphrase of an 18th century philosopher's quote about kings and priests. The MSU professor posted in September, I want the entire world to burn until the last cop is strangled with the intestines of the last capitalist, who is strangled in turn with the intestines of the last politician. And it comes from a Denis Diderot quote, men will never be free until the last king is strangled with the entrails of the last priest. So, I think that's okay.
Quote.
It's funny that it comes from an Enlightenment, a hero of the Enlightenment, and it's play on that, and yet all these pro-Enlightenment people are all like, no, that's outrageous. Right. Shut it down.
Yeah, I think BX, one of your commenters here, makes a really good point, like that the Harper's letter is just the anxieties of the media class and academics. And I do think like bringing a class perspective into this is important because, I was just thinking like, if we go back to the 1990s pre-internet and read through Harper's or any magazine, I'm sure we'll find 1,000 things that we think are really stupid, we disagree with, that are like, would be today, maybe cancelable. And people who wrote back then, or who were, kind of pundits or whatever back then, are used to not having to deal with the, the hoi polloi telling them that they're wrong, right? So I think that is a big part of it, is people are used to kind of just being listened to as authorities. And now that their position as kind of an authority is being challenged, that's where this anxiety comes from.
Yeah, there was no real mechanism to punch up before, and now people can, and they don't like it. It's like the wrong people are complaining in the wrong direction.
This is why Twitter is miraculous in some ways, because it does give you the ability to shout at famous people, and they actually, instead of ignoring you, they actually get mad.
Well, it depends if they see it. I mean, if you tweet,
mentions.
It's like the if you cut down a tree in a forest and no one's there, well, it doesn't make a sound. And so if you don't,
but at least you have a chance.
Yeah,
you
have a
chance of it happening.
Right? Yeah, it's out there. I mean, I think what's interesting. So Chomsky and Matt Karp were two of the people who signed the letter, and I actually had Matt Karp on debate Ali Abunimah without warning either of them. I just threw them in there, which I think is really problematic. But anyway, so apologies in retrospect. But, I do think that in some ways the left could do a better job of, walking and chewing gum at the same time. Like, we could say these people are hypocrites. There's a lot in here that we actually believe in and stand by. The differences were, consistent and not claiming to be these free speech absolutists, but actually weaponizing this and cheering on, remaining silent about, or in some cases, like cheering on the deplatforming of people who or the literal like account cancellation, these Palestinian journalists, for instance. I think like that is, we can also talk about that. Because I do think to some extent the left has kind of been like, well, that's bourgeois, liberal, and they're hypocrites. And instead of being like, those are good ideas I think what they said in the letter were good things. And I think we can like reclaim those things as opposed to letting them be tainted by disingenuous people.
Right. I agree. And I do think that there is something. I mean, I was just like I was on a date, actually, like a COVID date where you just walk around in the freezing cold for 2 hours.
Wow.
And I was talking, and both of us kept like, we were having like a really deep, good conversation. But like before like every other sentence, we would be like, don't cancel me. But, and I was like, wait, this is fucking ridiculous. Like, we're all so scared of just saying things now because of how our brains have been conditioned by the internet, and by this whole, I wouldn't even call it a culture. I don't know what it is, but so I do think there is something that can be reclaimed there. That's like, okay, the people who are, the loudest speakers on this are stupid people.
Oh, yeah.
But there is something here that like it's getting kind of ridiculous, and also just from a tactical perspective, like on the left, like
definitely agree.
is this what we should really be focusing 90% of our energy on, is like telling Chrissy Teigen she's stupid or something? Like, aren't there other ways we can be expending our energy? But I do think there, like, if it's a matter of like making a big point and a protest of Charles Murray in order to change how your college addresses race, that's one thing. If it's spending all of your energy yelling at the same 5 people on Twitter, that's just different tactically. But they all get lumped into the same cancel culture, you know.
Yeah, I think the last thing I would say before moving on is I feel like canceling and the urge to cancel, I think, is always going to be a part of human nature. So I think like PE says like PE says in their book that you have to at the end of the day kind of figure as a society, and this is what politics should be. And I think this is a great point that they made, that politics should be about figuring out what our shared values as a society are. You know, we have to do that. And PE said they might have to leave early. I was thinking of doing another 15 minutes, but PE, if you have to leave early, by all means, let us know at any time. But I wanted to. Okay, cool. So I wanted to talk about Neera Tanden, and Nathan had a great article about it. And this is one of the reasons why I always like having Katie on, and she's already demonstrated this. She has a near encyclopedic knowledge of every single interaction everybody has had with everybody. So you always remember. So even during this thing, you remember like certain little things that people had with other people and connections and stuff, like Andrew Sullivan and the Islamophobia thing, which I would not have remembered. But so one of the things I want to talk about is the idea that she was canceled for her tweets, Neera Tanden, and why she's not a sympathetic. For people who want to read Nathan's article, this is it.
When is it from?
Current Affairs. This is, I don't know why it came out so big, but yeah, I want to get it all.
From? I'm just curious. When
is it from? Yeah. It's from 2000. It's from December 2018, and it's a good summary of all the reasons that Neera Tanden is and her Center for American Progress are a pretty terrible outfit. But Nathan, if you don't mind, like kind of going over, well, two things: what Neera Tanden and Center for American Progress are about, and why she was basically not confirmed.
Yeah, I mean, in that article, I focus a bit on something that I think illustrates a lot about her approach. And the Center for American Progress is sort of the biggest Democratic aligned think tank in DC. And the specific incident that I zero in on is when they gave a big pile of money, several $100,000, to another think tank, the American Enterprise Institute, which is the one that Charles Murray's been associated with, and it's just a real pit of snakes, real horrifying place, the American Enterprise Institute. The Center for American Progress gave them a bunch of money because they were collaborating on a big project to combat populism of both left and right. So they mean, Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders.
Equating them,
essentially, right? And that is fundamentally the Center for American Progress's approach. They're much closer to the free marketers of the American Enterprise Institute than they are to the left. And Neera has made that clear over the course of her career. She advised the Clinton campaign against supporting a $15 minimum wage. Katie is the Neera Tanden expert who knows every awful thing that she's done in her life. But fundamentally, they are centrists, and they make it pretty clear that they are the enemies of the left, and that they want to hurt us, right? And that they would prefer, they would certainly prefer like Marco Rubio to be president than Bernie Sanders. They might
She
prefer.
quoted Marco Rubio on Chris Cuomo on CNN when he was asking her, and when Chris Cuomo is going after you, like you've really done something. He's not the biggest critical thinker. So, but he asked her about something in WikiLeaks, and she's like, "This is what the Russians want you to be talking about." I can't really do her accent, but it's something like it has a Midwestern twang, even though she's from Massachusetts. But she actually cited Marco Rubio, like in her defense. It's like, you're not supposed to do that out loud. Like he's a bad guy, a really bad guy. But it kind of speaks to how enthusiastically bipartisan she is. The irony is that she is aesthetically and behaviorally very. I wish she were as anti-Republican in her positions and policy as she was in her tweets, right? I mean, she did say, like, the best things she said were things about how, like, Ted Cruz is a vampire or whatever. Although problematic because it's vampire phobic, obviously, to say that. But, Jack Allison pointed this out to me on my show. I didn't know this, but he pointed out to me, he was like, well, at least with Joe Manchin, you can always depend on him not to vote against ACA. And I was like, huh? And then he reminded me that Neera Tanden had tweeted in his defense. She basically like endorsed him on Twitter, Joe Manchin, which is such a great metaphor for Neera Tanden, which is that she wound up, it doesn't usually end this well for us on the left, but there usually is more of a quid pro quo. But it just speaks to how. Her politics are terrible. She is, in some ways, she's like a more dangerous Ben Carson because it's like the neoliberal version of Ben Carson, right? Because Ben Carson came from, poverty, and then he grows up and he's like, I got out of it. And so everyone who escapes poverty, you can do it. And if you don't do it, it's because we give people handouts, right? Like that. I'm paraphrasing, but that's more or less his position. And Neera Tanden is like, I lived in Section 8 housing. I was on food stamps. My mom had to work hard, and that is why I'm fighting today. And also, every entitlement is on the table for being cut. So it's actually much more dangerous, because what you're forced to think, or what they want you to think, is that these cuts are necessary. They're like they're necessary evils that, of course, we wish we didn't have to do, but they make it into a technocracy issue instead of an ideology issue, and. She just is to me. Besides, she said, "Oh my God!" She suggested taking the oil from Libya and other countries that we basically destabilize or invade, or whose governments we overthrow, in order to pay for deficit here. She's like, it was an amazing revelation. It's in WikiLeaks, but she really does say that. And Faz Shakir, whom she had earlier shoved, as she says, but punched, according to witnesses. This is a subordinate she punched in the chest, because he asked Hillary Clinton about her Iraq vote. So Neera Tanden runs the gamut. She is terrible on economic issues. She's stumped for welfare. She worked on welfare reform. She denied she worked for welfare reform. She also is likes to cozy up with Netanyahu. Cap does a lot of stuff with a lot of foreign governments that they should not be supporting. And Center for American Progress, that is. She's a union buster. She outed a sexual harassment victim. And she also, then this is less important, but I actually find I think that the conversation over tweets, there's a lot to be said there that hasn't been said. And of course, her mean tweets about Republicans are not the issue at all. But, oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna say. Did you mention her physical violence too? She's that's
Faz Shakir, that she punched him in the chest. Yeah, or she says it was a shove. She doesn't deny it.
Which is still assault.
Qualifies. Yeah. And she, her the thing that Neera does, again, it's she weaponizes identity politics and lived experience. And her defenders actually use that word. Mimi Hirono used that word. The Biden Jen Psaki used that word. An MSNBC anchor. That people were putting that talking point out, lived experience. And what she does is she basically, instead of saying, because of my lived experience and the adversity I went through, I'm going to fight for people who went through that too. She says that she's going to do that, but then she takes away the programs that she benefited from. So it's it's totally, it's exactly what we mean when we talk about weaponizing identity politics. and biography. And the Twitter thing that I'm kind of obsessed with, because it infuriates me, but I also think that something important there is that she's one of the people who weaponized the Bernie bro narrative, right? And she spent so much time calling out and demanding Bernie disavow or repudiate anything toxic from any random person online. This person could have had one follower and said that they like Bernie and we don't even know if they're real. Or she made it look like David Sirota for writing an article or exposing the fact that Beto had violated a fossil fuel pledge. She made that something abusive, right? So these people weaponize the term abuse, and at the same time, they have, Neera herself refers to it as her army. And this army, this online army, whose members include people like Jeremy Istanbul, who said Bernie would have won, no, Bernie would have sucked my dick. I'll vote for any primary challenger who cuts his finger off. Bonus points if you take off that like tuft of hair. Linda Sarsour, when Linda Sarsour tweeted condolences and solidarity after the Pittsburgh shooting of the synagogue, he's like, look at Linda pretending that she wouldn't try something like this herself. And
oh, wow.
Neera Tanden calls this guy a friend. She calls him a treasure. She says, thank you for being like part of the army. Then you have Mr. Weeks, and Joy-Ann Reid is also chummy with these people. And Neera, actually, there's a photo of Neera hanging out with Jeremy in real life. And then you have Mr. Weeks, who says Bernie Sanders is a fake fucking Jew. His heart needs to stop right about now. And this is someone who is chummy with Neera Tanden, with Joy-Ann Reid. Horse Whisperer, of course, who said Breonna Joy Gray was white adjacent bro fodder. His tweet was read aloud by Brian Williams. Like, they thought that was an appropriate thing to do. And then you had Stephanie Ruhle being like, love Horse Whisperer. And Horse Whisperer, by the way, tried to hide behind a horse identity, but is a straight male human, straight white male human, who was like basically telling Brie how black or not black she was. Anyway, so yeah.
Sorry, trying to hide behind a horse identity is
right? Problematic.
Invoking the lived experience of horse identity. It is also just worth noting, especially because Neera was being considered for the Office of Management and Budget, that there have been numerous reports of her mismanagement of the Center for American Progress. The worst instance being, of course, the outing of a harassment victim at a company meeting, but also reports that she essentially bullied and abused subordinates, and you know was
right, that was a more recent
there was a recent report in which former people who used to work for her said you know that she say things like, you know, how are you going to get a date or what dress like that or whatever, and you know, just make people feel awful. So for all of this self-righteous posturing about how much she cares about bullying, the worst kinds of bullying are those that come from your boss, because there's a power dynamic in it, because you work for them, so you can't resist. And those same sorts of reports have come out about her. So, I mean, there are very serious reasons why she's not qualified for the position. And yet, of course, opposition to her was portrayed quite dishonestly as just bias against her, instead of looking at the real serious charges.
Right, and the fact that like Republicans are I mean, I don't know why anyone thinks we ever need to say this out loud again. Republicans are hypocrites. Like, but the fact that people think that because Republicans oppose her for the wrong reasons, that doesn't like erase all the terrible things she did that made the left oppose her. Now, I would love it if the left's opposition to her is why she didn't get the nomination. I don't think it is. I think that, you know, it's like so rich that one of the most like vitriolically and vocally and openly anti-Sanders person was named. I don't know if Biden or whoever's, you know, running things for him, if they were trolling, if they just really have no idea what Tanden represents for people on the left. But I do think that part of the reason it's so infuriating is because it just speaks to how, you know, it's like, remember Hillary Clinton saying, is breaking up the banks going to end racism? No. But this total, like, sorry, I should have done a trigger warning, but this total, like, you are standing in the way of policies that help, that don't get rid of racism, but that, you know, have real racial justice ramifications, right? Like the housing thing was not an equal opportunity thing. And you're standing in the way of these things and using this, like, this it's not just that you're standing in the way of economic justice and equality, but you're actually standing in the way of like economic equality or economic justice that disproportionately helps women and people of color and all the people you claim to care about and who are being ignored by class reductionism.
Right.
Yeah, I think something with Neera as well is that dynamic we were talking about, where people were trying to avoid talking about talking about people's values in politics by making it about the vague concept of cancellation. A lot of liberals were kind of doing that. So the usual suspects who do it on the right didn't do it in Neera's defense, but I did see a lot of regular blue check liberals, like NPR tote bag types, talking about, she got canceled for tweets. So they're combining the identity with the cancel culture smokescreen. So they're like, Trump has bad tweets and he was able to be president, which first off is a weird thing because that's a vote. That's not really,
Right.
congressional. If Trump had to do a congressional hearing to get elected, he probably would not have gotten elected either. But they're doing the same thing of trying to not talk about the substance of what Neera Tanden was tweeting or her actual politics and everything. And there's two things about that jump out to me. Is one, I agree with Yasmin Nair. Yasmin Nair wrote an article where she said that she's not really canceled for her tweets. Her tweets are kind of like a totem or an avatar for all her beliefs and her ways. Like, her tweets kind of represent a deeper problem of, her politics, her ability to get along with people, her discretion and all this stuff. Like, it's not really just about the content of the tweets or that she does mean tweets, but if it was just if she was just like a good candidate who did bad tweets, Yasmin doesn't believe they would really have stopped her over that. It's kind of like their own way of not really getting into their deeper problems with her as a personality, as someone in politics and whatever. So that's the first thing. I don't think she was really, really canceled for like the substance of the tweets so much as the spirit and the way that there were indication of deeper interpersonal and political problems with her. But the second thing to me, even if she was fired really for the content of the tweets and not her character and her politics, but just doing bad tweets, she got someone canned for just tweets. She got Matt Brunig canned. She tried to get Sarah Jones in trouble for something with her employer over something that I believe she tweeted or said in the article and stuff. Like in this case, I would be glad to make an exception because she has lived by this policy herself of getting people
live by the tweet, die by the tweet.
Exactly. Like, I am not going to cry any tears over someone who's gotten people fired over tweets if they got fired over tweets.
And I had Matt Brunig on, and what's so interesting about Matt's story, he was at the time worked for the think tank Demos, and he got into a fight with Joan Walsh and Neera Tanden about welfare reform, and that was the fight, right? That prompted Neera and Joan Walsh. Well, they haven't taken. Obviously, conversations were had behind closed doors, and lo and behold, Matt Brunig gets fired from Demos. And, they said that he was a troll, and they made up all these stories about him being they pathologized the relationship he had with his wife. They made him sound like he was abusive. He made a scumbag Steve reference. He called them said scumbag Neera, which who cares? I don't care. Like, if first of all, Neera Tanden made up a term for me. Do you want to know what it is?
By all means.
Dalton socialist, because I went to this private school. So she's like calling me a class traitor, which is great. I'd rather be that than I'm the opposite of her. Like, she came from, hard. She had a hard upbringing, and she wants other people to suffer. Yeah, that's exactly it. And it's so interesting because it was like they were fighting over policy, right? They were fighting over whether or why and she did, and she lied about it. But they were fighting over, a Clintonian reform of welfare that was like absolutely, horrifying especially for Black women. And in fact, you know how Hillary always cites her work at the Children's Fund and Marianne Edelman, right? Marianne Wright Edelman. Well, Marianne Wright Edelman and Peter, I think it's her husband, Peter Edelman, who was in the Clinton cabinet. He worked for Bill Clinton's cabinet. They parted ways with the Clintons over the welfare reform stuff because it was so horrible for Black women and children. Anyway, and that was Neera's doing. So it's just that they weaponized civility politics, online civility politics, to have someone who was working for a think tank removed. And that's like such an amazing example of how they let Twitter etiquette shape policy, right? Because what that really is, you get someone fired from a think tank, you're actually like you're changing the composition of this think tank, and it's all to cover your ass for impoverishing women so you can do it again.
Yeah, and not have to talk about the actual thing he was
Yes,
calling her
right.
a scumbag over.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, any other final thoughts about Neera Tanden that we didn't get to? Anybody crying tears that she's gone?
We should also cancel Kyrsten Sinema while we're at it.
Oh yeah.
Oh my
yeah.
Lord.
If you want to just give people who don't know.
Sure. So Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin are two senators who were voting against the Sanders amendment to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And, Joe Manchin is like, we all know he's a total blue dog. He sucks. He's awful. He's terrible on climate stuff. He's the senator from West Virginia. He had terrible voting record on things related to insulin medication. It was it was almost like a cartoon. He voted. It was basically some vote to make pharmaceuticals wealthier at the expense of EpiPens. So at the expense of people being able to inject themselves when they're having, is it allergies or diabetes? Anyway, it's some terrible thing. And he voted for it, and lo and behold, his daughter is works in that industry. But that's kind of just one example of over the top conflict of interest. But he's awful. But Kyrsten Sinema, who's a senator from Arizona, who likes to talk about what a feminist she is and that she's bisexual, and obviously neither of those things is problematic. I'm a feminist, but and you don't have to be any. My being something doesn't give it approval isn't the same thing as stamp approval. But the point is, she wears the label of feminist, and she not only voted against this amendment to raise the minimum wage. It was an amendment or a bill? Well, it was an amendment, right? Is that? She not only voted against raising the minimum wage, but she did it in the most casual, celebratory way. She went into the chamber, she pats Mitch McConnell on the back, comes over to vote, and does it in, just watch the body language. And then, watch her do the thumbs down thing.
So this is the pat in the back. Everyone shows the thumbs down thing, but I think it's important. I'm glad you brought up the pat in the back because everyone's leaving out the pat in the back. So
yeah, both. You can have it all.
There's a pat in the back. And first off, she looks like.
And she circles back. I wonder what she said to him.
She looks like she's at an anime convention. Why's she dressed like that?
Yeah. Well, and it's like Miss Sinema. No. Now, you're going to get canceled, Trevor, because as her press secretary said, it is inappropriate to talk about a woman's body language or outfit in a serious media outlet.
So I can't say that she looks like she's attendee at Lolicon. I can't bring that up.
You can, because this isn't a serious, I don't know which serious media outlet reported on it, but we can just talk about her sociopathy and not bring up what she was wearing or her body language. I think that body language shows an extra level of entitlement and how out of touch you are. You don't even know you're supposed to fake being upset or I would love, we just can't do it. We just don't have the money. But
that's such a reach. That's such a reach because I will say there is a validity to criticizing me for not, for talking about her clothing or whatever. That's fair. But it's funny that person said that you can't bring up someone's body language. So what if it's the middle finger?
Exactly,
what? Yeah. That's such a ridiculous. Body language is a very broad thing. Like, why can't you bring up body language? It's
Well,
so
we need
this
broad.
is
Joanne
exactly what
Reed's
I was-
body language expert in there. Sorry, what was I cut you off?
This
Pete?
is like what I was talking about before with like the kind of shortcuts we use. Like instead of cancel culture, we should be talking about like what's actually happening, and instead of like why people were angry, they're just like, this is anti-women to say that she's being like really terrible, you know, like or that, you know, if you critique her body language, you're being sexist. It's just a way to elide what people are actually angry at, and it's not something. I mean, this is a good example of how it's not something that's just done by the right or people like Barry Weiss. It's done by liberals too, because they don't want to have the conversations that are, you know, about why people are actually angry at them. They rather just get away with what they're doing by using these like big phrases.
And it's almost more insidious, right? Because like we know Joe Manchin sucks. He does like she tweeted something about like women's history like the same day that she was voting, you know, against a minimum wage increase, and 2/3 of minimum wage earners are women. So just like, you know, just stop. And yeah, she fucking sucks so much.
And her gratitude to the frontline workers. She posted what gratitude to all of the frontline workers helping us through COVID. Fortunately, all of the replies are people who say, you know, gratitude doesn't pay bills.
People act like you can eat symbolic gestures, like you can just put it on a plate and just start chowing down. It's so insulting. Here's the last question that I would ask you guys. What are your thoughts?
By the way, a full-time minimum wage earner makes less than $16K a year. This one's a no-brainer. Tell Congress to raise the wage. That's from 2014. I wonder what changed.
Yeah, good question. I want to ask you guys, like, what are your thoughts about basically the confirmation hearings in general, the first 100 days of Biden? The idea, to what degrees are you pleasantly surprised or not surprised? I mean, one pleasant surprise was Neera Tanden not getting confirmed. I'm fine with that. But all these walkbacks on so many things, you know, after we were told wholeheartedly that this is the most left progressive cabinet since FDR that we were going to get, you know, it's a lot of disappointment to me as well, you know, but some pleasant surprises. You know, the immigration stuff I thought was more impressive than I thought it would be. But I just want to get some final thoughts from. I'll start from the counterclockwise. So we'll start with Nathan.
Is this real?
Yeah,
Can I just ask one thing? If this is real, this Washington Post headline: Biden stimulus showers money on Americans, sharply cutting poverty in defining move of presidency.
Who wrote that?
It's from the Washington Post. It's a headline.
I'll look it up. I'll look it up while Nathan talks. I'll take a look.
Sorry.
Oh my
God, it's shocking to me. Speaking of the Biden, sorry, I just saw it.
Yeah, there's been a lot of effort in the press to dishonestly pretend that Biden is a serious progressive, even though his entire life. I mean, I don't feel so much disappointed by things because Biden has been saying his entire life, you know, I'm a conservative Democrat. He was put on the ticket with Obama because he was a conservative Democrat. That's why he was Obama's vice president, was to reassure racist white people that
Obama was articulate and clean.
So
as he called him.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, a Biden presidency, really anything progressive you get out of it will be kind of a shock. I was surprised. I was pleasantly surprised at Biden coming out pretty directly for the Amazon union. They put out a video where Biden says really explicitly, like, you should be in a union. Unions will raise your wages. They will give you health care. Unions built the country. That's a real pro-labor statement for a president. And considering considering the backers of the centrist part of the Democratic Party despise unions, it was a little, it was more pro-labor than I have expected this administration to be. You know, so it's full of things like trying to stick Neera Tanden in, trying to, you know, work harder to give Rahm Emanuel. They're going to bat behind the scenes for Rahm Emanuel to get him confirmed, but they're not willing to.
Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah, give Pete Buttigieg. He's rewarding all of these kinds of people, but still not even willing to do a $2,000 stimulus check. So it's full of all that kind of stuff. But there have been points at which, I mean, I think the public consensus has just moved so far left that they do understand that in order to appease public opinion, you do have to make certain noises now that suggest that you're progressive, even if you're trying not to do much more than you absolutely have to. That's progressive.
Yeah, and PE, by all means, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I mean, I haven't been surprised policy wise. I thought he would be boring and bad and all the rest, but I've been generally surprised at just how like uninspiring the entire thing is. Like, I haven't seen one good speech or like one kind of like viral moment from either of them. That, and you know, I know this isn't like as important as actual politics, but like, if the Democrats ever want to win again, they need people who are going to like, you know, rile people up and make them feel things. And, you know, this administration might be the same as Obama politically, but like, at least with Obama could get people feeling things through his speeches. And it's just funny to watch this entire White House just like feel like a fucking wet fart, basically. And
it's also funny.
That's more dynamic than they are actually.
Yeah, exactly. A wet fart will cause a reaction at least.
Yeah, exactly.
But it is fun to see a handful of the certain people that you know are just dying to be influencers and be noticed, like on some Notice Me Senpai stuff. Try to force enthusiasm, like, you know,
Right.
Lobster Ragnarok or those type of people would kind of be like,
yeah.
yes, you know. But even then, it doesn't seem convincing. It seems
Right.
very forced.
And yeah, I think the juice has just kind of like run out. The gas has run out of like neoliberalism in general. And people are angry and people want something more. And so it's just like everyone voted for Biden because they felt like they had to. And now we're like, okay, now that we did that, what do we do now? Because everyone is just bored. And I don't know. Yeah, it's not even like fun to dunk on them anymore because it's just like, you guys are so boring and predictable and there's nothing new happening. You're just doing a kind of like clips show of past neoliberal presidents.
Yeah, I really agree. Even those lame late night political shows are just getting lamer somehow. You know, without Trump.
I know, it makes me miss how corny they were with Trump. At least there was some like stuff to.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. It's
some,
gotten
like,
even
whatever,
worse.
what's the opposition? Yeah. I mean.
Since we went back to you, I was gonna go back to your this ends up being true.
It's like it looks like an onion. It looks like an onion headline.
Yeah, it's gotta be hard to be doing the Onion right now because real media just keeps topping them all the time.
That's insane.
If it is
That's like Fox. I mean, how is that any more objective? It's inaccurate, but it's also like so clearly, like, you know, rooting for him in a way that like Fox News is always called out for doing for Trump.
Such a press release.
It's such a press release. Yeah.
The most generous. With the word "generous" is just a weird word because that's kind of
showers Americans in money. That's like insane. Like they didn't need their editors need to tone it back.
And the word generous is also a very value laden, like moral statement. Like, you know, the goodness of your heart. You didn't have to do this, so it's not even like this is what people deserve. This is charity.
It's not
almost.
It's not like required. Yeah, it's charity. Yeah.
They did more than they had to.
Countries have been being paid thousands of dollars a month to stay home every single month since it started, and now we get like $1,200 or whatever, and it's generous.
So ridiculous.
Oh,
I mean, you could have written like didn't even get the promised like minimum wage increase, or the $2,000 check that they can't.
There's a thing called manufacturing consent. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I know. Seriously, Siri, what is manufacturing consent? This tweet, this article. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a total tongue bath. Like ambitious legislation and all that. Yeah. It's pretty crazy. I might actually do a follow up on this article. This is a good article.
We should read it. We should go through it. We can do an extra thing.
I mean, it's all
unbelievable. The shower thing is the crazy part. Showers money on Americans.
I mean, it's pretty short. I'll go through it real quick. President Biden's stimulus package, which passed the Senate on Saturday, represents one of the most generous expansions of aid to the poor in recent history, while also showering thousands, or in some cases tens of thousands of dollars on American families navigating the coronavirus pandemic. The roughly 1.9 trillion American rescue the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan, which only Democrats supported, spends most of the money on low income and middle class Americans and state and local governments, with very little funding going toward companies. The plan is one of the largest federal responses to a downturn. By the way, you guys can feel free to interrupt and interject at any time. You don't have to wait for me to finish. Has enacted, and economists estimate it will boost growth this year to the highest level in decades and reduce the number of Americans living in poverty by a third. This round of aid enjoys wide support across the country, polls show, and it is likely to be felt quickly. Wow, this is a very big prediction about how likely it's to be felt by people. Likely to be felt quickly by low and moderate income Americans who stand to receive not just larger checks than before, but money from expanded tax credits, particularly geared toward parents, enhanced unemployment, rental assistance, food aid, and health insurance subsidies. It's kind of low on specifics and high on feelings of like what it's going to accomplish. I wonder if this is partially written by someone in the press office. It seems
I
like
think it's written by Larry Summers, because look at what the next line is. But the ambitious legislation entails risks, both economic and political. The bill, which the House is expected to pass and sent to Biden within days, injects the economy with so much money that some economists from both parties are warning that growth could overheat, leading to a bout of hard-to-contain inflation. Meanwhile, some businesses are saying that government aid has been so generous that they're already having trouble getting unemployed workers to return to work, a problem that could be exacerbated by legislation. This
is an insane article,
right? This is like I imagine like a terrible Washington Post journalist, like just sitting down to write a draft, and this is their first draft, and then they sleep on it, and they're like, okay, wait, let me tone this down, because like it's way too, I'm being way too generous and enthusiastic in my praise. Like I need to pretend that I'm not upset, like totally in the tank for this guy.
I had to scroll back up just to make sure that this wasn't in the op-ed section, and no, it's in the business section under economy. Yeah, so I mean, if I was an editor, if someone even gave this to me as an op-ed, I would be like, okay, you got to dial it back or put some more figures in here or something. But this is not even. I mean, I think it's bad even for an op-ed, but it's not even an op-ed. It's just a straight up
and that's the most dangerous part of journalism, is when they're reported news. This is nothing. This is like, I mean, I guess, yeah, it's analysis. Is that what they call it? But it's the showered part is just so. I find that like so.
It's a very vivid image, like just
like he's just like doing this like on the strippers, like,
yeah.
Made it rain. Biden administration makes it rain on America.
Yeah. All right, I gotta go. But
okay, no problem.
Thank you with y'all.
Yeah, you too. Great meeting you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Also, get their book, "The Case Against Free Speech," by P.E. Moskowitz. Really, please get their book.
Interesting interviews. Really good interviews.
Yeah. Definitely get their book at all costs, for sure.
And follow me on Twitter, Pem, if you want.
How do you spell that? So
PEM, cool. With underscores between. Yeah. All right. I'll see y'all later.
All right. Take care. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, that isn't just an amazing article.
When you say showered with money, it makes me think if they had a way to even convey this succinctly, they would probably try to make people think of Scrooge McDuck on DuckTales, just swimming in the pool of money. Like the showered is crazy.
We should just swap that image in instead of the Biden one. Can you imagine how hard they're trying to make this look like it's a good thing and not a total fail? I mean, not a totally shameful capitulation.
Yeah. I mean, there's no minimum wage in it. In a bill without minimum wage, without minimum wage increase, people are getting showered in money. And this part is interesting, where they try to compare themselves against other people to make it sound better. Unlike many other significant anti-poverty measures passed by Congress in history, this one has a short time horizon, with almost all the relief for families going away over the coming year. Well, actually, I take it back. This is, I guess, it's token criticism. That could be an abrupt awakening for Americans who have grown accustomed to financial support since Congress moved swiftly to create a stronger safety net at the start of the pandemic a year ago. It also lacks the bipartisan imprint of former President Trump's bills, which directed money in larger measure to companies as well as individuals.
Okay, it makes it sound like Americans are getting spoiled.
Yeah, basically. And it's time to
coddled.
Get responsible. It's time to, they're doing their part, but don't expect like a free ride, get ready to go back to work and stop being a freeloader is the feeling I got.
Well, yeah, stop being a freeloader, and also, you guys shut up about everything, including this package, because apparently it actually represents the most effective set of policies for reducing child poverty ever in one bill, especially among Black and Latinx children, says Indivar Dutta-Gupta, co-executive director of the Georgetown Center on Poverty and Inequality. The Biden administration is seeing this more like a wartime mobilization. They'll deal with any downside risks later on. Really? I don't think this is what a wartime mobilization looks like.
Staggering. Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, this legislative package likely represents the most effective set of policies for reducing child poverty ever in one bill, especially among Black and Latinx children. I'm surprised Latinx is, hitting the mainstream. Said Indivar Dutta-Gupta, co-executive director of Georgetown Center on Poverty and Inequality. The Biden administration is seeing this more like a wartime mobilization. They'll deal with any downside risks later on. The number, it's crazy how deep in the article, like close to the end, they finally bring up numbers. The total numbers are.
Okay, yeah.
You can say, what were you going to say?
No, you go.
Oh, the total numbers are staggering. Cumulatively, the government will hand out $2.2 trillion to workers and families between the relief passed last year and this latest bill, according to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. This is a funny name. A nonpartisan group. That's equivalent to what the government spends annually on Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid combined. Like, they're just trying to find every type of stat and combination and framing to really sell this. And I don't think it's mentioned the minimum wage thing at all.
Yeah, does it mention it? Do Apple F minimum wage? See if they.
Yeah,
but
that's true.
Nathan, I do think though the point you made about the unions.
Quick thing, I did a control F, command F, and minimum wage is not mentioned.
What about 15? What about 15?
Let's see.
So guys, this is an article that does not mention the most Nope. Okay, so this doesn't even pretend to be honest. I mean, it's just not even reporting. It's not even
they could have taken the White House press release, basically formatted it for the Washington Post and put it in the Washington Post.
And forgot to change it so it doesn't read like an op-ed.
Nothing.
Yeah, I'm very sure this was fed to them, like literally.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it doesn't discuss the lie about the $2,000 checks.
Right, of course not. Does it? Does it want to do Apple F check?
Let's check that too. I'll do it.
Oh wait!
Wow!
Wait,
no,
that's
hold on.
It's a child tax credit.
Oh yeah, you're right. So it says $2,000 and $1,400, but a different $2,000.
Yeah,
$1,400. And it says there's two mentions of. Nope. That's
there we
it.
go.
That's the only mention. Wow.
So they don't mention that they gave up on the minimum wage. They don't mention that they lied about the payments.
Unbelievable. I mean, it's only what everyone's been talking about. It's only what everyone's been talking about for days. And you don't have to be reading Democracy Now! To get this $15 minimum wage thing. MSNBC is talking about it because it's a thing. Because they voted around it.
I have a feeling there's going to be more articles like this. I got a feeling they probably have a couple of people at different places that they fed this line to.
Who wrote this so we know? We know.
Oh, great.
I mean, this is a big risk of the Biden administration, right? Yeah. Is that what's going to happen is that the stenographers at CNN, Washington Post, New York Times are going to build a pretend world in which Biden is doing really, really well and delivering for the American people. And the people inside the circle are all going to believe this. And then in 2022, they are going to be utterly shocked when it turns out that Americans do not live in the make-believe world in which Biden is the next FDR. They live in the world of their own lives. And somehow the stupid voters have not realized how incredible Joe Biden is and have rebuked the Democrats at the polls. It's the same kind of delusion that we've seen before.
Can you scroll down a little bit? I want to see because it has the top headlines, right?
I
want to see what number 5 is. So number 1 is Biden. Number 2 is Biden stimulus showers money on Americans, sharply cutting poverty and defining move of presidency. Then it's calculate how much money you would get from the expanded child tax credit. Then it's who qualifies for a third stimulus check. How will it work this time? And then Biden limits eligibility for stimulus payments under pressure from moderate Senate
only under
Democrats.
Pressure. Because, of course, they didn't want to do it, but they were forced to.
Yeah, he's forced to, yeah. I mean, this is a wartime mobilization, and during wartime mobilizations, you let moderate Dems force you out of doing certain things.
Well, I really despise Kyrsten Sinema, too, but there is a way in which she becomes a scapegoat for the Biden administration's own priorities.
Of course. He doesn't want it. He doesn't want it. He doesn't fight for it. He doesn't want to fight for it. This is the great thing about this administration and winning the Senate is that I stupidly thought maybe it would force the Dems to actually fight for stuff, but no. What it does is it forces the Dems to stop pretending that they can't, or they have to do it in creative ways. They can't. They can no longer pretend their hands are tied by Republicans. Their hands are now tied by moderate Dems. Their hands are now tied by 2022, 2024. The whole lie of Dems wanting to do the right thing but not being able to is just totally exposed. But it also is covered for and covered up. And Nathan, I think you mentioned how you were pleasantly surprised by Biden's pro-union statement. But to me, it's just like that's of course you're right, not of course, because it's not that Dems can be awful. They don't even know how to pander to unions sometimes. But it also is like, you're doing that while not actually doing anything to relieve people.
It's still just a statement. It's words.
Yeah, it's words, yeah.
Totally.
They're not going to try and change the labor laws, right, to make it easy to join a union. They're just going to say, unions are good.
Right. Put a cap on Bezos's whatever. Yeah,
right.
No.
Real quick, since you asked about the names, do any of these names ring a bell to you as far as the authors?
Heather Long, Alyssa Fowers, and Andrew Van Dam. I feel like Alyssa Fowers sounds familiar, but
yeah, that name sounds familiar to me as
look
well.
Them up.
Yeah,
they're not
definitely. Looking still doesn't ring any bells. Economics correspondent, graphics reporter focusing on digital visualization analysis. So I guess Alyssa Fowers, she looks like she might have just been in charge of creating the graph. So let's not get too hard on her. So Andrew Van Dam and Heather Long seem to be the ones.
What's his specialty?
Oh, his specialty is reporter focusing on economic data.
Now, remember when the guy from the Washington Post, I can't remember his name, Ian something, he's a transportation expert, didn't mention the fact that as mayor of South Bend, Pete Buttigieg's smart streets resulted in the death of an 11-year-old black child. No one ever talks about that. Like the fact that they didn't even have to cover it.
So
Christian Moore is his name.
Yeah, actually, it's a little bit longer than I thought. So I was gonna try to jump through. I thought it was shorter for some reason, but I mean, they put a bunch of charts in there, which I think kind of serve to kind of obscure things a little. Yeah, so there's a chart in there. It's hard to capture it on the whole screen, and this, but exactly how much money Americans are set to receive depends on a number of factors, including whether they are unemployed, their household income. To me, they should be starting off with this stuff and not all the characterization. The
showering.
The showering. So much of this is characterization. I'm just skimming ahead to see what a single job loser in Tennessee would get around $44,000, including $6,200 that would have been available even without the stimulus. And they bring up tax credit, unemployment insurance, and stimulus payments combined to come up with that number. So I guess that covers a year or something.
It's a weird term too, single job loser.
Yeah, yeah. It's. I mean, there's so much massaging of the stats and the framing to kind of get favorable. Yeah, this is like downright hilarious.
I know, it really is.
This is the kind of thing you could probably get trending on Twitter as a joke.
Yeah, what should we do it? I'll do it now. What should we call it? Biden report? What could it be? Like, I tweeted out, "This is real."
Yeah, unofficial extension of the Biden cabinet, Washington Post or something.
Yeah.
I don't know, but yeah, I mean it's I mean really holding their feet to the fire here. I'm really impressed.
It's Fox. It's just Biden's Fox.
Yeah, yeah. Can you imagine if Fox did this? Exactly. If Fox did this for Trump, it would be hilarious.
You know what? I'm gonna do a screenshot and I'm gonna cover the Washington Post with what would it be? Like the Daily Caller, Fox News? I guess we can do Fox. They have articles, right? And I don't know. Sometimes I get these things get a little. They make sense for me, but not for other people. So, but yeah, this is literally something that Fox would write about a Trump thing, and the Washington Post would be horrified by it and talk about how we have an end. Democratic the fourth estate and democracy have eroded. There's no normal anymore.
Yeah, for sure. I had to move it around because I had this caption blocking your face. That was not right, Katie. So there we go.
Can't
thank
do that
you.
to your sister.
Exactly. Can't do that to my sister. My sister from another mister. So, yeah. Thank you, ADOS Truth. Someone said.
Oh wow, very generous. Yeah.
Yeah, Biden makes it rain on America. Just put that. Yeah, that would be great. That would be a great. Yeah, but I'm telling you, you could have put that.
Yeah, we do need a hashtag, right? I've started the hashtag woke washing.
Yeah, that's a great term. I've been using that term. People heard me use that term. Were you the one that coined it? I think you might have been, right? Yeah,
I did. Yeah. But we got to get something for this, like Biden washing. Oh, Biden washing.
Yeah, or White House washing, whatever.
White House washing, yeah.
We have time. There's no pressure, but something has to be put about that one.
Something must be done. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's about all the time that we have. But thank you guys for doing this. I was trying to get this together for a little while, and I thought you guys would be a great combination. Well, first off, I didn't realize when I invited both of you to be here that you guys have been on together so much in the past, so many times in the past.
Constantly.
Yeah.
Because we're good. Because
similar circles, and then I had to clear his name as a Jewess.
She put me on trial.
Oh yeah, you should watch it. We made a clip. It was me and Ben Spielberg and Ben.
She had two guys named Ben.
Two Jewish Bens, me and Leslie.
And decide whether I was formally guilty or not guilty of anti-Semitism.
And you'll have to watch the clip. I'll put the clip in. You can put it in if you want.
Oh yes, send me the clip. I'll put it in the show notes because I was gonna put Nathan's article, PE's book, and I'll put that link in there.
Okay, awesome. And I have the video of Jack Allison telling me about that. And and also a reminder to everyone. Please, if you like Useful Idiots, you can find it at usefulidiots.substack.com because it's going to be the same great show. It's going to be free content like it is now, a weekly show, and then we're going to give extra stuff if you are a Substack supporter. Basically, we're like doing the Patreon model, but none of this, like, it's not all Patreon. It's Substacked, and only, it's in addition to the show that we already provide.
Great. And if there's anything that you want to mention or plug, Nathan, by all means, please do.
Well, I just encourage people to subscribe to Current Affairs Magazine, and I'm also doing on the 20th, I'm doing a one-day writing seminar online. It's going to be open. It's on writing and publishing, teaching people how to improve their nonfiction writing and also how to make a living as a writer or start an independent project and fund it. So it's
rule number one: don't joke about Israel.
Don't joke it. This is going to be like how not to get fired. These are the tweets that will get you fired from your newspaper column.
I'm so horrified by The Guardian, by the way. Did they respond at all? You had a petition. Tell us about who signed the petition. Just in 30
it was all sorts of luminaries. We got Cornel West. We got Michael Moore, Noam Chomsky, like lots of incredible people. But, silence from The Guardian.
Oh, that's crazy. Even with those heavy hitters.
Yes.
Yeah. Naomi Klein's had a nice tweet saying that I should, the Guardian needed to give me my job back. But even Naomi Klein,
I'm gonna harass that John. What's his name? McDonald.
John Mulholland. Just make sure you harass him in an Irish accent.
I impersonate his Irish accent, But I figured would be. I read his letter to emails to Nathan out loud in an Irish accent, and I'm allowed to.
There you go.
But yeah, so that writing class is on Eventbrite now. We're selling tickets. It's $60, but it's a full day session, and it's going to be tons of fun.
Yes, Great. And also subscribe to the Katie Halper Show on YouTube.
Do that.
Oh yeah. So that Katie Halper on YouTube. I mean, when I put the clips into the description, they're from the Katie Halper YouTube channel, right?
Yes.
Oh yeah. So people will be able to follow the clips, and then for people looking for them now, they're not putting them in the show notes now. But as soon as we're done recording, I will put them in immediately. Yeah. So thanks everyone. Love Katie's show, Current Affairs. I've been reading for years, and definitely check them both out. And yeah, take care everybody, and everyone who joined us. Thanks. Oh, last thing. You can support us on, if you don't like using the super chat, you can always Venmo or Cash App us at Champagne Sharks or PayPal, champagnesharks@gmail.com. Helps us get new equipment or pay off student loans, whatever. It's all good.
Not that you need that, according to Biden either.
All right, guys. Take care. Be good.
Thanks. Bye. You too. That was fun.